again, and welcome to Spotlight. Today is November the 11th, 2022, and this is our episode number 32. Today I'm going to be joined by a couple of old-timers who I hope most of you will remember. First of all, I'd like to reintroduce Leo Graham. Now, Leo, you really surprised me. I didn't expect you to be here in person. I thought I was going to see you via remote.
No, well, some things are best live, and you were one of them. So it was worth the ride.
Well, that's great. And I would like to reintroduce Kevin Kuntz. Now, Kevin is our local, actually he's our local farmer and our chief correspondent on economic matters.
Economic guru was the name he used to give me.
Yes, I remember.
Well, I
that.
used to call you a guru.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I thought that was pejorative, but I didn't say anything.
Okay. Today we're going to be talking about the outcome of the midterm elections. And as always, this is going to be first, we're going to try and begin with just straight information about what we know about it right now. And let's just begin with the House of Representatives. And it appears that based on the current status, the Republicans will regain control of the House by a slim majority.
I think it's only 2 votes, right?
Well, maybe more. It's
5
plus or minus.
maybe.
They're still
up in the air, right?
And of course, in Alaska, they're fighting. There are 2 Republicans who are fighting for their seat, and it looks like Sarah Palin is not going to be the one that wins. Now, in the U.S. Senate, that's going to be a much more interesting discussion, and we're going to get into that in detail. But right now, it looks like it's an even split, or plus or minus 1 on either side, whichever way things turn out in Nevada and Georgia. In terms of the gubernatorial election, we have records on about 13 different states that voted, and in 4 of those states, Republicans won the gubernatorial office, and 9 Democrats won that office. In Vermont, it was sort of an election as predicted, except the Democrats did slightly better than they expected. And we'll get into the details of that later on. And just in general, in terms of state legislatures, this is one time when the Democrats really had expected to get chopped. And just the opposite apparently has been happening. They've taken control over 4 state legislatures that they haven't had for a while. That's in Minnesota, New Hampshire, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Okay, now, gentlemen, that's sort of a brief summary of what happened. Now, let's talk about the results. First of all, in the House of Representatives.
Well, I think we were being led to believe there was going to be a red wave.
Yeah.
And that I know when Leo's first accepted the invitation to come here, his reprise was going to be, oh my goodness, I'm going to be crying, because he's sort of a more blue person than a red person. And I think the Republicans at their widest imagination were thinking they were going to have a 20 or 30 vote majority in the House.
The 22 votes just sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 20 and 30. And no, as you just mentioned, no place close to that. It looks like maybe at most it'll be 5 and 2, or it may not even happen at all, depending upon how some of these things turn out.
Well,
Clearly, well, what you're looking at in some measure is a renunciation, or at least the beginnings of a renunciation of Trumpism. You want to call Trump a Republican? You want to call him a Democrat? I don't think he's either. I think he is his own and not terribly good force. One of the few places that Trump's support, oddly enough, seemed to work out was in Ohio, where J.T. Vance who wrote a beautiful book once upon a time, Hillbilly Elegy, and did not used to be all that conservative, suddenly decided that his best friend in the whole world was Trump, and he won election. But generally speaking, the Trump magic dust didn't do what was forecast. And from my point of view, it's good for the country. I think it's good for the Republican Party too.
Well, I'm not so. I don't think. I am not a fan of Donald Trump's. I'm not sure that he played that important a role. I think we misread, or the electorate was misread by the pollsters, whether they were not interviewing the right people or not. One of the guys I respect highly is a guy by the name of Frank Kuntz, and he was dead wrong. He thought, he was up in the 20+ category, and I just think it was a misread by the pollsters.
Well, one of the things that I think is coming out of this, which I find very interesting, which is hard to really quantify, and I know somebody's going to try to do it, but you were referring to Trumpism, Leo. In my own opinion, I don't think Trumpism is suffering. I think the man that it's named after is going to be suffering from it. I think Trumpism in and of itself is a function that is just going to stay with us for a long time, whether we like it or not.
Right, the individual. I think that's probably correct. What he did was he capitalized on that portion of the population, and they have supported him, as they may have supported Leo or me if we were loquacious enough to have been able to be as persuasive as Donald Trump was. And Donald is a very persuasive person, not to my way of thinking, but to a lot of people's ways of thinking. And I think that's what people misjudge to a great extent about the electorate. And I hope you're right in nailing the head, that I never liked Donald Trump ever. When he was in New York, when he was running casinos in New Jersey, and when he ran a television show. And I like Donald Trump even less now. So I haven't changed my opinion on Donald Trump. And I think that Trumpism, or that he just happens to be the focus of who these people were, or how these people think. And, the rejection of the big swamp in Washington, D.C., he played on people's fears and did it very well.
Well, I think this is, and again, go back to J.T. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, who went a long way toward explaining how it is a whole group of the white American electorate got angry. And I tend to think that Trumpism, as expressed in much of the Republican Party, not all of it to be certain, but much of it, is reactionary politics. It is, they don't like the fact that America is changing, and it is. Demographically, ethnically, is...
But that's been historical. In the
I know,
United States.
and is the Hispanic population going to change America? You betcha. Just like the Irish did.
Yeah.
In fact, and they'll have an immigrant experience much like the Irish. And you can see it even now. But if you think that somehow your little suburb of America, little enclave, is embattled, and that people who don't look like you or talk like you or cook like you are moving in, you can do one of two things with these folks. You can go make friends. Hi, how are you? No, I've never had a tamale. Or you can say, I smell that nasty stuff you're cooking. Move out of my apartment building right now. There are kind of two choices there. And a large part of the white male electorate is of the opinion they want them out of their apartment house right now. That is less true of white women.
Okay, well, let's try to concentrate on the election. Although I do have to sort of repeat what I've already said, Leo. I think Trump has lent his name to something which he is slowly being divorced from by those he we're favoring him. And I think the simplest way to look at that is to look at the attitude of the Republican Party in Georgia, where there's going to be a runoff election for the Senate seat. And the one thing that they have made very clear is they do not want Trump showing up for their candidate.
Well, he did show up. He kind of, as a political entity, he sort of invented Herschel Walker, a man who was a stellar football player, a superb football player, but clearly, and as is likely to happen in that sport, he's taken a couple of hits to the head that perhaps he has not fully recovered from. He doesn't, if you listen to him speak, particularly when he has to speak off the cuff, extemporaneously or answer questions, he doesn't do well. He has a lot of problem.
But nevertheless, he got over almost 50% of the vote.
Because he's a big star football player.
Right, it's okay.
Well,
So
you could say the same thing for Fenneman in Pennsylvania,
Right.
but
So I think what's going to happen in Georgia is that Trump will stay out of it. The swing will be the governor, whose name escapes me right now. I can't remember. He's a Republican, and he won.
the Republican governor won.
Right.
He beat Stacey Abrams in the end.
Stacey
Yeah.
Abrams, right. He beat her and handled it by like 5%.
Yeah, he did.
It was over a million
That
votes.
was Kemp.
Kemp, right. So if Kemp were to come and back Herschel Walker, I think then he has a pretty good chance of winning. Kemp has indicated he's going to stay out of the race as far as I know at this point in time. But I think if Kemp laid his hands on him and said, I like you, I think he could swing a lot of votes towards Herschel Walker.
No, I
Okay,
think
well-
if Trump has a successor in this kind of movement, it's all 3.5 feet of Ron DeSantis.
Well, that's something we're going to get to later on, Leo.
All right.
Let's just concentrate now on, okay, I think we've sort of agreed on the House.
Yep.
There's going to be a slim Republican majority.
Yep.
Now, on the Senate, this is where things looked like the Democrats were going to go down the tubes. And this is where there were a number of surprises made, particularly in Pennsylvania.
Right.
For those viewers who don't recall, Fenneman, the Democratic nominee in Pennsylvania, well, what was it, 5 months ago?
In May.
He had a stroke, and that effectively stopped his campaign for, I don't know, must have been about 3 months.
At least, yeah.
And Oz, the TV doctor, was expected to be a hands-on favorite. And as the results came in, it became apparent that that was not going to be the case.
Well, he was a carpetbagger, first of all. He
Yep.
hadn't been in Pennsylvania. He tried to become Hillary Clinton all over again. Hillary Clinton moved into New York and became a senator within 3 months after moving into New York.
Yep.
And he sort of tried to do the same thing. And Pennsylvania sort of rejected that to a great extent. And then unfortunately, from his perspective, I think he did get the backing of Donald Trump.
And sought it.
Yeah.
And I don't, did he? I'm not sure.
Yes,
he did.
He
He
did.
did.
Okay. So for whatever reason, I think that was probably a mistake, simply because of all of the turmoil that went on in the voting, and it's still going on in the voting in Pennsylvania. They haven't solved all of their problems yet.
Oh, no.
So
But
I think that affected it.
But,
immensely.
One of the things that we towards the tail end of this we should get to is the question of fraud going to be a major issue again in this election?
Not yet.
But
In this election?
not
Yeah.
right now. But
I don't think so.
first of all, I think we can post a graphic that I think would help us with the Senate to understand the Senate. And if you look at that graphic, all those states in blue elected Democratic governors. Those in red voted for Republicans. And those where the color has a crisscross on it, that means it was flipped from one party to the other. And the only state showing that is Pennsylvania, which went from Republican to Democratic.
This is an historic election because of what didn't happen. Since at least 1948, this is the lowest, the fewest seat losses in the House and the Senate for a party that controls the presidency. And given Biden's historically low numbers, he's in the 20s in an approval rating, the fact that the Democrats did what they did is remarkable. And you're right, the pollsters missed it. On the other hand, it's hard to take polls these days. Nobody's got a phone number anymore.
Right.
Nobody answers. So it's difficult. It may be a dying art. But the story of this is what didn't happen. That always happens in by-elections.
Well, it happened, but it just didn't happen to the extent of the sweep.
It has happened. It happened to a lesser degree than any by-election since 1948 that I'm certain of. I can't.
The big sweep was.
My brain doesn't go back that far.
Was Clinton. Clinton got swept in '94, and Obama in 2010.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yep.
Both big turnarounds. But those were more vocal, voluble persons and personalities. Joe Biden is sort of like an easygoing, easy Joe. So he sort of, I don't think, created any real conflict in the situation. And he was easy to pick on because he's Slow Joe or Lonesome Joe, which people want to call him. So I don't think there was a big to-do as there was in fighting for things that took place with Clinton and with Obama.
I think there's another factor in this, and that's, everyone was saying the economy is going to be it. That's going to be the decisive factor. I think it was to a large degree true. Mm-hmm. However, I don't think anyone really appreciated the effect the abortion ruling would have on it. And that definitely had a decided impact as well.
I think that was yes, I believe you're correct.
And particularly with women and suburban women, surprisingly, so that places that are traditionally hardball Democrat, there's a county where I live in, it's Waukesha County, Wisconsin, which is the most reliably Republican county in the nation. Republicans are going to take it. So how you win as a Democrat in Wisconsin? You don't expect to win. You expect to chip away at the majority so you can take care of the rest of the state. And clearly that is one of the things that happened in this election, is that suburban white women did not vote with their husbands.
Split tickets.
Yep.
This may also be one of the things that the polls not so much misread, but were unable to read.
Right.
In all fairness to the poll takers. How do you measure something like that that's liable to happen?
I don't know.
You may have a gut feeling that it may happen, but you don't have any statistical basis for it.
Right. A lot of people saying what they were going to do and then doing the opposite, or saying, I'm anti-abortion and I'm going to vote for the Republican guy, and getting in when they had to do the pull the lever. I guess you don't pull levers anymore, but
no.
To enter your ballot, you changed your mind in the last minute.
Well, I think it's decidedly has a very important factor, and I think it, even if the Republicans do, as we assume they will, take control of the Congress, of the House, the likelihood of a national abortion bill coming up, I think, is very unlikely. I think they've already seen the impact of that.
Well, you still have the filibuster rule in the Senate, so there's no way that it's going to happen.
It is painful, endlessly painful, to listen to men of self-righteousness decry this abortion thing because, do you really want to control women? Is it that important that you control their bodies, their thoughts, what they do? I would rather have dinner with somebody who brings something to the table of her own than...
That's a difficult portion. That's a difficult stand to make because, in essence, the true anti-abortion people are not trying to control the women. They're thinking of the life of the child, of the fetus. What's the viable state? What is the viable?
I tend to think that's the excuse.
Well, you know, the only part of this that really annoyed me and bothered me was an ad by one of the, by the Senate, the Republican senatorial candidate in New Hampshire, talking about, you know, most of these rulings are without exception on abortion. And so rape and incest and the life of the mother are excluded.
That wasn't.
I mean,
that wasn't his ad. That was the Democratic ad.
But the
Boy, yeah, accusing.
but his ruling that, well, if it's the case of the mother, we need a panel discussion.
Right.
I mean, could you picture a physician in the middle of an operation saying, could you please call up the panel and see if I can go ahead with this or not?
I know some OBGYNs who are not amused.
No, I don't mean it amusingly.
No, I mean they're petrified. When I say they're not amused at that. But really, the story of this election, and the big banner headline is, election 2022, not much happened. And if you're a Republican, not much happened is considered a defeat, a rebuke. If you're a Democrat, not much happened is like ring the merry bells of gladness, hooray.
Well, okay.
But it's the same result.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, in terms of the gubernatorial election, the governor of Michigan, who was being assaulted from all different sides, got reelected.
Yep.
And even the governor of New York, who just inherited the position from Cuomo's resignation, she managed to get through as well.
Right.
And she got through handily. Well, unlike the last lieutenant governor of New York who assumed the governorship because the governor quit under scandal, Kathy Hochul's she's really done a good job of it. She has been the governor.
Well, she's been very good from what I've seen of her.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on what's going on in New York politics, but her appearance has always impressed me, what she had to say.
It's a funny thing, out there in the middle of the Middle West, where I reside most days, save this one, you get the New York Times. So that it is, I know much more about New York State politics than I do about the politics of Illinois, which is 90 miles south of me.
Well, there's not much to know about the politics of Illinois.
Except it's crooked.
I mean,
it is no better now than
you get outside of Cook County, and it's a very different situation. A lot of people don't realize it. When I did my grad work out at Champaign-Urbana, as far as I was concerned, the Mason-Dixie line was somewhere up just south of Cook County.
You know, and the urban-rural split in American politics is becoming sharper and less good. The best example of that is one wag describing the politics in Pennsylvania is, it is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh separated by Alabama.
Well,
And it's, you know, it's a kind of a cute line as such, but it's it does some explaining.
yeah, when you say Philadelphia, you got to think Philadelphia in the main line, and nowadays also Philadelphia and Bucks County. So I mean, it's a little more than just Philadelphia. Pittsburgh, I'm not that familiar with, but
No, but the whole geographical megalopolis kind of thing of Philadelphia. Right. Even the main line tends to vote Democratic.
well, the main line is. They used to be a very dependable Republican base. They're no longer that.
No.
And Bucks County used to be a very dependable county for Republicans, and it's no longer true.
No.
But okay, at any rate, we did hit on the polls. Now, you think there's anything else to be said about the polls and about the way the way pollsters run?
I think Leo sort of nailed it before. It's so difficult now to do the polling experience. I was a freshman in high school. In college. I went out and polled on the streets by going up and knocking on people's doors.
Yeah.
for what were then called, which was then the blue chip poll called the Gallup poll.
Oh,
really?
yes.
And you'd fill out you'd ask the questions and fill them all in and get them back, and that was how you tabulated the polls. It was a pretty good, and they were pretty accurate, within 2 to 3%.
Yeah, but they didn't have the internet then. So.
No, they didn't have the internet, and people were home, or most of this is done by phone now. So you get called on the phone. You get called on the phone, somebody starts asking questions, I say, no interest, and hang up.
And the phone numbers now are randomly generated because the white pages, remember the white pages, more or less doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Lots, more than half of the households in America no longer have a landline.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, they're using their cell phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay. Now, about the control of the Congress. Now, we've already said that the Republicans are going to have slight control of the House.
Right.
And now, theoretically, that's all it takes to get something done in the House.
Well,
It's not quite like the Senate.
Yeah, but it's not 100% true. I mean, remember, to get a majority, what's the split? 218, I think? And if you have 218 people, you're not going to get 218 people who think exactly alike. And whether they're Republicans or Democrats, it's easy to get 3 or 4 or 5 and sort of knock them off the loop. So if you only have a 2-vote majority, McCarthy's going to have a tough time mustering a full.
Well, you're assuming McCarthy's going to get the speakership.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he will. There's nobody who's going to run against him.
Well, somebody else is already.
The freedom.
Well, somebody could, but
Yeah.
who's going to run against him?
Well,
in the Senate, the Democrats have had control and will probably have it again. And so but there are clearly 3 parties in the U.S. Senate. There's Republicans, there's Democrats, and there's Joe Manchin.
Oh, there's also Bernie Sanders. And
Bernie is a much more reliable vote for the Democrats
that's correct.
than Manchin.
And you have the gal, Kristen, out in Arizona,
oh,
who also is the same sort
yeah,
of.
and
So there's all sorts of. So it will be.
I think the House, I don't think it's going to change dramatically one way or the other.
No, do I? I think you'll have legislation come out of the House that'll go idle in the Senate.
But there's going to be a House investigation of anything Hunter Biden ever did, including did he really earn his Boy Scout patches, assuming he was a Boy Scout. So we'll go through that demi-drama. They may even impeach Biden just for kicks. Some of them have certainly threatened to, just cause.
Well, that was, unfortunately, it was the just cause why they impeached Donald Trump the second time.
Yeah,
That was just stupid. It didn't make any sense.
The first time at least, whether you agreed with the case or disagreed with the case, there was a case.
Right. Second time.
Second time was I don't like you.
Right.
Go home.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they're going to find it hard to do it to Biden.
No, they're not.
I mean,
I'll give you 100 to 1. How's that?
it's well, if you're going to give me 100 to 1, I'll take that.
Okay.
They're 101 on most things. But
I'll see. I'll put up $1.
Done. But they've only got 2 years to do it in.
All right, even in 2 years, it's worth a try.
Okay.
well, clearly Joe Biden has to make up his mind about running in the next couple of months at a minimum.
I can see no way that he will run.
Well, let's first of all, let's finish with the Senate.
Sure.
Now, the Senate has still got that 60-vote rule.
Yep.
Now,
Which isn't that old.
no, but then they still have the filibuster.
That's the filibuster, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are they going to be able to actually attack it, and will they have the willpower to attack it?
Well, they need the 60 votes to be able to do it.
No.
No.
They don't. They need a simple majority.
Oh, is that what it is? I forget. Well,
To make the filibuster go away, you need a simple majority.
Because this is a Senate rule.
right.
It's not
I
legislation.
know. I couldn't remember which one it was.
I know.
It was simplistic enough, but the senators don't want to give up that privilege.
The minority party
Right.
particularly.
Right.
So, well, let's face it, the Democrats sometime will be in the minority, and then they will still want to have that right.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, now what's going to be the impact on Biden's agenda?
I don't think it'll change at all. I think he's gotten through whatever he he had a difficult time getting it through, and he's going to have no way that I believe that you're going to see anything from a revenue point of view come out of the House that's going to be anything that he would like.
Okay.
So I think he's going to be sort of stymied at this point in time in terms of what his agenda will be. The things that people are looking, at least the talking points are, we need to do something about immigration. Well, that's been the talking point for the last 4 or 5 elections, presidential elections. And if you talk about midterms, you're talking double that. We haven't done a thing, 0. We had a recommendation from Simpson Bowles back in 2012, I believe it was, on how to, and we did a show on it, as a matter of fact, on how to control spending and get everything get moving and underway, and Obama never listened to it. So it's where are we headed? Sort of to the same sort of meandering that we've been doing all the way through here.
Okay, now
Executive orders will be the norm rather than passing new laws.
yeah, executive orders just carry so far.
I understand, but that's how he will try to govern, I think.
That's what he's got left is the bully pulpit and executive orders.
Okay, well, no. What kind of legislation do you think is going to result?
There's not much. I don't expect there to be much. So I think, economic and immigration, the two big key points, and nobody can seem to get together on it. I mean, immigration seems to be so simple that we can get people together to figure out a policy on how to handle this situation, and nobody's doing anything. And we've got an instance here. I just read about it today in the Vermont Digger. There's a guy who came over from Uganda, has been here, and he left because he was going to be killed in Uganda. And for whatever reasons, they didn't give him depth. Both of his appeals for clemency, or for, not clemency, what do they call it when you, when to appeal to stay here for humanitarian reasons, both denied. And now he just got turned down in his case today, and he's going to go back. And he says, what are they going to do? When I walk in, they'll kill me. Now, what kind of stupid immigration policy allows this kind of stuff? It makes no sense to me. So, this is all a long-winded answer as to what kind of legislation are we going to get through. I mean, what legislation did we get through? It was a big struggle, and it was all money related. That Biden has gotten through in the first 2 years.
Okay, let's talk about something that's very critical to the credit of this country, and that is the spending limit, the debt limit. Mm-hmm. Now, we've never passed anything lately that allows us to, just allow this to go on for a couple of years without having to worry about debt limit. What are we going to do now?
Same thing. They're not going to change.
There are 2 interlocking factors here. One is the debt limit.
I mean, one of the things that I would personally love to see is the requirement that in the Constitution that there be a budget proposed every year, for a year, and that if you fail to do that, you get 90% of what you had last year, and that's it.
Makes sense.
Well,
that would be great.
You
sound like a true Republican.
The budget stream has two rivers that come together. One is the debt limit, whatever it is, and the other is the budget, whatever it is. And so far, and for a long time, we've been dealing with budgets that are good for 3 and 4, effectively provisional budgets.
Yeah, well, number one, how many people can keep track of those provisional budgets? I mean, God, you've got to be an actuary to figure out what the devil the budget annually costs.
If you're in government, for example, if you're the Navy and you want to build submarines, you got to put some money down on those in advance, and you don't have a budget. So we are spending, for example, in beating our plowshares into swords in this case, but we are spending much more money on defense acquisition than we need to if we simply line up, put the ducks in a row. We can't, because there's no budget.
Okay, well, okay, now What do you think this election is going to have in terms of an impact on the presidential election in '24?
I think anybody's guess at this point in time. I mean, from the Republican side, it appears that you're going to have Trump announce next week sometime that he's running,
Yeah.
and I can't see that any way that he won't announce that.
Okay, now what about DeSantis? He's the governor of Florida who had a very, very big win in Florida.
Right. He is right now, I guess, the front runner. There's Cotton out of Arkansas, who's a Barry Goldwater kind of Republican. I don't know. Who knows what will happen? I don't. The part I think is who's going to run on the Democratic side. I do not believe Joe Biden will run.
Well, personally, I was all for Joe running in the first place because, frankly, I considered him the only viable candidate that they had. But I do think he should step down.
What has Joe done to offend these people? Joe has one kind of real problem is he's a stutterer. And it does mess up, not just the stutter itself, but it is a whole brain speech thing. And so he sometimes misspeaks. He sometimes that's not a function of growing dementia. It's a function of how it is you are a stutterer in life. Now, okay, you want to hold that against him? I think that's a rather cruel task.
I don't think anybody's holding that against him.
Well, they say that he can't speak right, that he must be losing his mind, that he's too old. Because look at the way he speaks. The way he speaks is because of a well-documented and understood medical condition.
That's part of it. The other part of it is that his ideas are not consistent. He does not. That has nothing to do with speech. He says one thing and then corrects himself later on. He's in favor of fracking. He's not in favor of fracking. That's also Letterman, the same. Letterman with the guy out of Pennsylvania was the same thing. Fetterman. So the problem here is, I think, is even if that is true, it's perception. And I always used to use the expression "perception is reality." And in this instance, that is to your correct, is how Joe is perceived. That he is slightly demented. And he can't get his thoughts together. I sympathize with him for what the problem he has and how he's overcome the stuttering. And I don't see it as much as he used to, I don't think. I just see that the man, I'm exactly 1 day older than he is. And I know my thought process is not as good as it was 10 years ago. And he is too old. And I think that we should have an age limit on presidential people to be president of the United States.
What about Senate?
Same way.
Congress?
Same way.
Well, you know,
Governors?
when Social Security came through in 1933, the average amount of time that a human being lived to collect Social Security was about 9 months. Now, it's decades. The problem with the Social Security Trust Fund isn't that it's underfunded, it's that people stop dying. Would you get back to dying so this thing will be solvent again? Now, that is true. In fact, there's a good argument made for raising the retirement rate from 65 to perhaps 70.
But that's economic. There's nothing to do,
But it
has
also
nothing to do with intelligence.
no. But it means the assumption is that an American can be and is generally vibrant both intellectually and indeed physically. Decades beyond what they were in the middle 30s.
Well, my only feeling about this whole thing is that, as far as Biden is concerned, I think he's a great president. I think he's done a lot that people that needed to be done. I think he's also tried some things that are a little more questionable, which is not unusual for a party president to do. What concerns me is very simple, Leo, and it has nothing to do with his physical health. Right now, as a member of his own party, he is a detriment to the party. And I think voters will look upon him that way.
Why? Why is he
Leo,
different
I
than
have
the
no
party?
idea why. I'm just saying this is the way I believe. I think they will look
Its
at it.
perception is reality, and I think Ralph is correct. That is how he is perceived at this point in time.
No, but to sit back as we're and say, well, you know, he's just too old. He's too something. He's not focused enough. These are all. If you gave that as an answer to your teacher for something as a sophomore in high school, they wouldn't accept it. Give me some facts. Back it up. Find me a footnote, any footnote. You came up with fracking, a fraud issue, but in general, Joe Biden's performed, as far as I can tell, extremely well as president.
So let's just use the oil analogy. He has not denied the fact that he has tried to woo Maduro in Venezuela to get more oil. Yet he's against incentivizing people in the drillers here in the United States to do anything. You can't get blood from an orange. I'm sorry, you can't get oil from an orange or blood from an orange. Right now, Venezuela produces 600,000 barrels a day. At their peak, they produced 3 million barrels a day.
They have the largest proven reserves of petroleum in the world.
Correct. They produce 3 million barrels of oil a day. There's no way we're going to get, there's no benefit to going to Venezuela, zero. All he's going to do is lose face, and which is what has happened with both his own party and with the country.
No,
I don't think there's anybody who says that that's a good idea.
Okay, gentlemen, I don't think we're going to come to any sort of agreement on that one particular point.
But that's the whole concept of...
Let's take the point, Leo, that Biden does decide to sidestep the election, as Johnson did once. And who would the Democrats put forward?
right now, that's a wide open race. It could be a woman's time. The governor of Michigan is popular with a large percent of the party. The governor of California, Newsom, is equally. There are people out there, but as no one has dared to stick a toe into the water yet, I don't know, but I don't know what Gavin Newsom in fact stands for. Probably it's well known, but I just don't know it.
Okay.
I don't get the LA Times.
Kevin, you have any thoughts on it?
Boy, I don't know. Newsom is the one who comes the most prevalent. He's obviously moved around to different states during this campaign. He was down in Florida and tried to get a debate with DeSantis, and it didn't work. He's been sort of moving around in the background or in the foreground and saying, I'm here. I'm the governor of the biggest state, fifth largest economy in the world. So, I do have some experience.
What about on the Republican side?
Unfortunately, if Donald Trump runs and is defeated, which I think he will be if he runs in a primary, he will then go as a third party candidate, and it will ensure a Democratic election.
Do you know 6 years ago when Trump was doing this, like, hey, Trump, this is great. This is just what we need. Nobody's going to elect this guy. Hope he gets the nomination. And he does. Relax. It's in the bag. Nobody's going to vote for this clown.
Right.
And the next thing you know, the clown is president of the United States. Shocking by all accounts, even himself. So I have been roasted by Donald Trump. Absolutely burned to a crisp by that guy. I'm not going to put anything past him.
No, don't underestimate him. You're absolutely correct.
And believe me, what we would consider lie, cheat, and steal, he would call the business of everyday life. I mean, you certainly would possibly get in a crap game with this guy.
Correct. Or ask to bring in somebody else to bring the dice in.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay, now look at. We've talked about everything about this election, about 24. What about just the political picture in general in this country? What's going to happen in the next decade?
Well, I'll take the first stab at it. I think we're going to be healthy and do A-OK. The United States seems to always pull out of all of these problems. The first election I voted in was in 1964, and I was a Goldwater conservative. And if you ever saw the campaign that was more virulent and smearing a guy all over the place, Lyndon Johnson took Barry Goldwater and made him look like the guy who was going to blow atom bombs up all over the world.
The most famous political commercial in history.
That's correct.
Do you know how many times that ran?
Yeah.
Do you know how many times that commercial ran?
No, just once.
Yep.
That's all it had to run. And the United States has survived a bunch of stuff. So I have faith in the country. I have faith in our processes. I think they work. We may not like, they're messy sometimes. We get people yelling and screaming at each other, but we sort of seem to be able to work it out most of the time. So I'm confident that we'll do that as we go forward.
Okay.
I
Leo?
wish I was. I've never been worried about a coup from the left in this country. I've always been worried about a coup from the right. There was a stab at it last January 6th. Trump reminded me very, very much of James Buchanan, everybody's favorite worst president of all time, because he didn't do nothing except kind of lead the nation into a civil war. We have more guns than people in the nation. However, the percentage of people who own guns is only about half. So if you own one, you own lots of them. There is a part of me that worries about a coup from the right. I will guarantee you this. I can't prove it, but I will guarantee it's true. From the 6th of January until the end of his term, Donald Trump would not have been able to push the button. We know that Miley called his counterparts in both China and Russia saying, don't worry about it, there's not going to be any war. In the last days of the Nixon administration, there was an intercept and he wasn't going to be able to push the button. But if we get to the point where you're kind of hoping for a coup of the generals, man, I truly worry about the future of the Republic. I worry about really angry people with guns who, to use Winston Churchill's near motto of the Second World War, if Britain was invaded, he planned to say, you can always take one with you. And there's enough people like that in the nation now. I think at the end of the day, I think you're probably right. It's going to be okay. But I think there could be genuine tumult in the middle.
I think we're going to have problems. We're going to see the old Anglo-Saxon WASP group suddenly realize, hey, we're no longer in the majority of anything. And then you're going to have the Latinos, the blacks, the Asians, all of whom have already begun to speak up, demanding a little more action, be part of that action. I think that is going to be healthy, but every time we have that kind of thing take place, there's always some sort of unfortunate violence involved in it.
Well, I don't think there has to be.
Well, I'm just looking at now at history, Leo.
The closest it came to being right
If you want to think about it, think about the Irish, the Italian, the Germans, the Russians, all these immigrants. They went through all their own various phases. The Irish in particular, if you remember, around Boston.
Well, certainly in about 1900, Holy Mother Church convened a convention of cardinals and bishops in the United States in Baltimore. The Baltimore Convention, we kept the Baltimore Catechism out of it. And one of the things that they said is, if any parish that can't afford it must have its own school. They wanted to keep the Catholics out of the mainstream. I had a great uncle who half of his day was in German, half was in English, because to lose the language was to lose the faith. And they were that strong. It took John Kennedy giving a couple of fairly blunt speeches about the fact that I am an American first, to blunt some of that. And we need somebody to make that same speech again. I don't care if you take it off, mimeograph it off. Remember those? A history book and just read it out loud again. The notion that you are an American first before you're Hispanic, Irish, German.
Well, I grew up, my father was an immigrant from Great Britain. He occasionally used to get very upset with me when people asked me, what background am I? And I would say, I'm an American. And he would say, you're English Scot. And I would say, I was born in this country, I'm an American.
True enough.
And Leo, I think this is something that takes time, and we just simply have to adjust to it slowly, painfully in some instances, and unfortunately some of those instances are painful. We've got a history that reflects that.
In the city in which I grew up, Milwaukee, until the Second World War, really, you could comfortably live and work speaking no English.
Yeah.
Either speaking German or Polish. Ein Bier bitte. And it took the tumult of the Second World War, more than the First, to drive some of that out. But that's a long time. You would consider as recently as 1940.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I think we're getting a little bit off the election, so let's
More into philosophical outlooks.
Well, the difference, the election, the soul of the country, they're all the same topic.
Well, they are to a degree, Leo, but I like to concentrate on specifics while I can. I want to thank both of you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Ralph.
I'm sure that we don't agree with one another in all things, but that's what makes the world go around.
It does.
And I want to thank you viewers for taking the time to watch us. And if you have some disagreements, for God's sakes, make them known to this TV station so you can get on the air and tell us what those differences are. But for that, this is going to be a wrap. We'll see you sometime in the future.
Thanks.